A lion doesn't chase approval. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He simply is calm, grounded, and unbothered by the noise around him, and yet his presence commands respect without a single roar in a world where men are constantly told to pursue, to prove, to impress, to convince. There's something quietly powerful about the man who doesn't chase. He doesn't run after love. He doesn't fight for attention, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows anything that requires him to beg was never truly his to begin with. You see, attraction isn't born from desperation, it's born from discipline, from knowing your worth and walking like you own your space. Even if no one's clapping for you, that's the essence of Stoicism, to live by your values, not by your emotions. And when you embody that, people can feel it. She can feel it in this video. We're going to break down exactly why the man who steps back, who protects his peace, who stays grounded in self-respect, becomes the one she can't ignore. Not because he chased her, but because he didn't need to number one. Quiet, yet always felt quiet, yet always felt a truly magnetic man. Doesn't need to fill the air with noise to make his presence known. His silence isn't emptiness. It's a deep and meaningful quiet, the kind that speaks volumes without uttering a single word. He's not the type to chase validation to prove his worth through constant updates or reminders of his existence. Instead, he allows his presence to do the talking, calm, unbothered, grounded. This is the man who doesn't chase, yet somehow he always seems to attract, not because he's playing a game, but because his energy is anchored while others broadcast their desires, loudly hoping to be chosen. He lets go of that need. His attention isn't scattered, it's intentional, and when he gives it, it means something that's rare. That's what makes people lean in curious and intrigued, even if they can't explain why. He's like still, water reflective, deep, and hard to ignore. His silence doesn't create distance. It creates gravity. It makes others wonder, why doesn't he chase? Why is he so calm? While everyone else is trying so hard that wonder becomes attraction. Because in a world that constantly craves attention, the man who stands still, who doesn't need to be seen to feel worthy, becomes the one everyone ends up noticing stoically. He understands what Epictetus taught. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. He doesn't chase because he is already whole. He knows his value is not up for negotiation and that the right people will feel it, not because he announces it, but because he embodies it. His silence is not absence, it's discipline. His stillness is not indifference, it's mastery. Think of the woman who expects pursuit, who's used to men proving themselves, seeking attention and playing by her emotional tempo when she meets him, and he doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't fight for what isn't freely offered. It rattles her because his silence isn't passive, it's purposeful. And suddenly, she's the one drawn in, questioning, remembering, wondering. So if you're watching this, ask yourself, can you be that man? The one who knows that true attraction isn't earned through chasing, but through presence, purpose, and peace, not by proving, but by being. Because the man who doesn't chase doesn't have to. He attracts by design. Number two, not chasing, but not chasing, but not standing still. Standing still. There's a common misconception. If a man doesn't chase, he must be passive. But the truth is quite the opposite. A truly attractive man doesn't stop moving. He just doesn't walk in the direction someone else expects him to. He follows his own rhythm. He doesn't chase anyone, not because he doesn't care, but because he's pursuing something more important himself. His life is like a river, not chaotic, not stagnant, but always flowing. He spends his time learning, growing, and understanding himself more deeply each day. He sets goals for his life, not to impress anyone, but because they make him feel alive, like a stoic. He doesn't get caught up in things he can't control. He understands that other people's emotions, attention, even love, they come and go. But personal growth, that's lasting picture. A man running every morning. He doesn't look around to see who's watching. He runs because it's a promise he made to himself, rain or shine. He keeps going. That's the spirit of not chasing, but not standing still. Even if you're not with him, he's out there living, moving forward, growing bit by bit, day by day. He doesn't use silence to avoid things, and he doesn't use consistency to control anyone. He simply keeps going, not because he's been left behind and not because he needs someone to lead him, but because he has a clear direction inside. He doesn't need flashing lights to show the way or applause to feel validated, just daily discipline and a sense of purpose. And that's exactly what makes him attractive. Not because he's untouchable, but because he's grounded. Not because he's arrogant, but because he has values. And not because he's cold, but because he knows what's real and what's temporary. He's capable of love, of care, of deep connection, but he'll never lose himself just to be with someone else. This man's attractiveness doesn't come from being chaste. It comes from being someone others want to walk beside. Not because he tries to impress, but because he's living authentically. And the truth, when lived fully, always speaks louder than any sales pitch number. Three, value is not in the eyes of value, is not in the eyes of others. Others, a truly attractive man does not spend his life seeking validation. He does not live like a mirror waiting to reflect the gaze of others to know his worth. He is himself, grounded, steady, and self-contained, even when no one is watching. His strength lies in his inner stability. He doesn't rush to express himself in hopes of being liked. He doesn't water down his truth to fit into someone else's frame. He's not ice cold, but he is firm. And he knows that if his value requires constant approval to survive, then it isn't value at all. It's a mask waiting to slip in a world that glorifies visibility, performance, and the need to constantly be seen. This man stands as a quiet rebellion. Instead of asking, "How do I look?" he asks, "Is this me?" He doesn't move to please. He doesn't act out of fear of judgment. He moves with intention, guided by an inner compass, not public opinion like Epictetus taught. If your peace can be disturbed by praise or insult, then it is not real peace. This man doesn't sell his soul for likes, applause, or temporary validation. His self-respect is not on the market, and that's exactly what makes him so powerful. His presence is magnetic, not because he tries to impress, but because he doesn't. He walks into a room not seeking to be noticed, but somehow everyone notices. His lack of need creates space for others to breathe. And ironically, that absence of pressure draws people in, not because he's performing, but because he's anchored, secure. Real, he does not chase anyone's gaze. He knows attention is fickle, looks fade, crowds move on, but character that stays, purpose, that endures, depth, that speaks even in silence. And that's what he lives by. This is the man others feel safe around, not because he's soft, but because he's sincere when you're with him. You don't feel the need to impress. You feel the freedom to just be, because he doesn't live to be liked. He lives to be honest. And in that honesty, people often find something they didn't know they were looking for. Number 4, self-control. Self-control is the 6 temperament. 6 is temperament. There's a kind of attractiveness that doesn't come from muscles, sweet words, or a smoldering gaze. It comes from a man's ability to master himself. He doesn't need to shout, "I'm strong," or prove his toughness through impulsive actions. He simply shows up with calm presence, and people naturally sense this is someone who knows exactly what he's doing. While many men get swept up in emotional highs, infatuated by a glance, swayed by flattery, or thrown off by a single compliment, the self-possessed man remains steady, not because he lacks emotion, but because he's trained himself to do something most people haven't, to separate feelings from values. He can be attracted to someone, feel genuine chemistry, and even be moved deeply. But he doesn't let a fleeting emotional wave pull him off course. Like a seasoned fighter who's been through enough battles, he knows even a gentle touch can be bait, and not everything that makes the heart race is worth chasing. Stoic philosophy teaches a truly free man is not a slave to his own passions, and you can see that truth in a truly magnetic man. He feels deeply, but he's not ruled by those feelings. He knows when to lean in, when to hold back. And above all, he never lets someone else steer the direction of his life just because of a momentary spark. You might see him in a situation like this. A beautiful, charming woman approaches him and makes her interest clear. He's not cold, but he's not rushing either. He responds with kindness, but keeps his boundaries intact. Not because he's arrogant, but because he knows truth takes time to reveal itself. And desire, as we know, can be very good at lying. This kind of man makes people feel safe, not because he controls everything around him, but because he controls himself. You won't see him explode over something small, nor will you see him bend himself out of shape just to gain someone's approval. He lives by his core values with quiet strength and unwavering grace. And that's what makes him so quietly captivating. He doesn't chase anyone, but the longer you're around him, the more you feel, "I want to stay close to this person," not because he does anything extraordinary, but because he never loses himself. Even when the world around him starts to shake, in a world where many men trade away their character just to be loved, to be noticed, to be called a real man, the self-governed man takes a different path, quiet but certain. And that path, though it won't win every heart, will always lead to the hearts that recognize and value what's real. So before we move to the next insight, take a moment to reflect, what kind of energy are you walking with? Are you leading with presence or chasing validation? If this message resonates with you, let it be more than just a passing thought. Leave a comment below and share your perspective, or simply type, "Real strength is silent." And if you're finding value in this, don't forget to like the video. It helps more men walk this path of quiet lives by goals, not by emotions. Strength number 5: lives by goals, not by emotions. An attractive man isn't someone who lacks emotions. He's someone who doesn't let emotions lead him. He doesn't live to feel comfortable. He lives to become the best version of himself. He doesn't deny his feelings, but he puts them in their rightful place as part of the journey, not the one steering the wheel. When he loves deeply. When he truly hurts, but no emotion. No matter how intense can make him forget the path he's on, this kind of man doesn't wake up wondering who texted him, who's thinking about him, or who might be hurting him. He wakes up with a clear goal in mind. He's building something: a career, a mission, a philosophy, and anyone who wants to walk beside him must be headed in the same direction, not to control him, but to walk with him, not pull him off. Of course, this isn't harshness. It's maturity. Like a mountain climber who knows it's not that he doesn't want to stop and admire the flowers. It's that if he lingers too long, he may never reach the summit. He understands that some feelings are beautiful and powerful, but not all are aligned with the journey he's committed to. Stoicism doesn't tell us to reject love. It tells us to love with awareness. Love when it helps both people grow. Let go when it pulls you away from who you are. A truly attractive man isn't someone who can't feel pain. He's someone who doesn't let pain define who he is. You might see him in a relationship that's just beginning to bloom. Things are going well. The other person is wonderful. There's real chemistry. But then he realizes their paths don't align. No drama, no bitterness. Just a quiet, firm step back, because he knows if he keeps going, he'd have to give up something essential in himself, and he will never trade his inner freedom for temporary satisfaction. And because of that, people sense something in him that's rare in many men: clarity, in how he lives, in how he looks at you in every decision he makes. He doesn't let himself be driven by circumstance or manipulated by fleeting emotions. He is the one adjusting his compass, and he walks forward even when others take easier, flashier shortcuts. They say you're most attractive when you're not trying to be. And that's never more true than with a man who lives with purpose. He's not trying to make anyone fall for him, yet people naturally want to be part of the bigger picture he's creating, because he doesn't live to find someone who makes him feel complete. He lives to become the kind of person someone would choose to walk beside. Number 6, no control, but gravity. Some men enter relationships wanting to control everything: their partner's emotions, their behavior, even the final outcome. But the truly attractive man doesn't need to control anyone, and yet people choose to stay. It's not power, it's gravity. He doesn't compete for attention. He doesn't play emotional chess games. But being around him, you feel something undeniable. If you could choose anyone to walk this life with, you'd choose someone like him, someone who makes you feel free yet deeply connected. The most attractive man isn't the one who demands anything from you. He's the one who makes you want to give everything, simply because being with him inspires you to become the best version of yourself, while many men are afraid of being left clinging tightly through control or jealousy. This man chooses to let go, not out of indifference, but out of trust. The Stoic mindset has taught him we cannot control others, only our own response. So he doesn't play mind games, he doesn't beg, he doesn't pressure. He simply stands calm, grounded like a mountain. If someone wants to leave, he won't chase. If someone wants to stay, he won't try to convince them. A man like this makes you feel safe, not because he shields you from the world, but because he doesn't react from fear. When you're upset, he listens rather than retaliates. When you feel like walking away, he doesn't plead. He just looks at you, asking silently, "Is this truly what you want?" And sometimes that quiet strength alone is enough to make you stay, because you realize what you're about to lose is something rare. His magnetism doesn't come from appearance or tactics. It comes from the way he lives, with depth, with values, with a clear inner compass. He never tells you to change, but being with him makes you want to ask yourself, am I living true to who I really am? He doesn't need to control anyone because his own life speaks so clearly. It becomes a natural guide, like a lantern that never calls out, yet draws people from the dark simply by shining. And that's the irresistible pull. He does nothing to make you stay, and yet leaving doesn't even feel like an option. Number 7, not easily. Not easily accessible, but always present. Accessible, but always present. A man who isn't easily accessible isn't closed off. He simply has standards. There's a vast difference between being distant and having boundaries, and he chooses the latter. He doesn't try to please everyone, nor does he let just anyone into his life, simply because they happen to knock at the right time, because he knows not everyone who knocks deserves to be invited in. He's present, but never loud. He shows up, but never performs. This man enters your life like an undercurrent, quiet, steady, and impossible to ignore once you feel it. He doesn't leave an impression through words, but through energy. Even when he's not around, you remember him, because when he was there, he gave you his full presence. No pretense, no distraction, no mask. That kind of presence is rare in a world that's noisy and rushed, and because it's rare, it holds weight. But not everyone handles that kind of presence well, especially not someone who's used to controlling the room with drama manipulation or emotional games. She got angry, not because you mistreated her, but because you didn't lower yourself to her level. You didn't argue, you didn't chase, you didn't let her provoke you into emotional chaos. Instead, you stayed grounded. You chose composure over reaction, distance over disrespect, and boundaries over emotional bargains. That's the Stoic edge, as Epictetus said. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation, and you refuse to be complicit. You knew the cost of trading your peace for momentary validation. You see, when a man stands firm in his calm, he becomes unsettling to those who depend on conflict to feel powerful. She expected you to snap, to plead, to explain, but all she got was stillness, that silence. It wasn't passive, it was power restrained, and in that silence, she saw the truth. You didn't need to win an argument because you'd already won something: far greater control over yourself. That's why she remembers you. That's why deep down, she felt frustrated. Not because you vanished, but because you didn't play her game. You stayed present, but unshaken, strong, but soft spoken, caring, but not controlled. And that's what makes you rare. You weren't easily accessible, but you were always present in your values, your energy, your silence. And in a world that rewards reaction, you chose to be the man who lets his restraint speak volumes. It's one thing to be missed for your presence, it's another to be remembered for your discipline. When you don't react on command, when you don't play into emotional theatrics, it shakes people. Not because you were cold, but because you were composed. That's a kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is, and it teaches others without words how real boundaries feel. Before we move forward, I want you to take a moment and reflect. Have you ever seen someone become uncomfortable with your calm, with your refusal to be baited? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Or if you know exactly what I'm talking about, simply write, "My peace doesn't beg to be understood." Number 8, silence makes others think. Silence isn't emptiness. It's the silence makes others think. Quiet voice of inner depth. A man who doesn't chase doesn't need words to captivate. He's not the kind to talk just to fill the air, nor does he use messages or clever phrases to hold someone's attention. And yet, that's exactly why people stop, reflect, and begin to question themselves in his presence. His silence isn't cold, it's meaningful. He doesn't create distance to play games, but neither does he invite chaos across the gates of his inner world in a culture obsessed with constant validation. He's a reminder that peace doesn't shout. It simply exists, and because he doesn't perform, those who crave control often find themselves frustrated. They expect reaction, they feed on emotional response, but he offers something stronger: stillness. That's the quiet strength of a stoic one who steps back, not to disappear, but to see more clearly, to observe, without absorbing, to hold space. Not because he has nothing to say, but because he refuses to waste words on what doesn't serve his peace. When a man is silent but present, you feel it. The energy shifts, the room slows down. There's something unspoken yet unmistakably commanding about him. A deep gaze, a well-timed nod, a silence that feels like it sees right through the noise. It unsettles the shallow and stirs the self-aware. And if she once tried to provoke, to test, to pull him out of that calm, only to be met with quiet resolve, she remembers it. Maybe she got angry, maybe she called it cold, distant, or unfilling, but deep down she felt something she couldn't name. His silence didn't break her. It made her confront herself, and that's what most aren't ready for. You don't know exactly what he's thinking, but you know he's thinking. You can't hear his emotions, but you sense something steady burning beneath the surface, grounded and composed. That's why his silence is unforgettable. It doesn't fade. It echoes long after he's gone. It lingers like a question left unanswered. A man who doesn't rush to speak, who doesn't need the spotlight, who doesn't try to make anyone stay, is often the one others quietly hope will return, not because he begged to be remembered, but because he left behind something they never expected: the rare feeling of being in the presence of someone who doesn't chase validation. Only truth number 9. He doesn't fear loss. He doesn't fear loss. He weighs the trade off. He doesn't cling. He doesn't chase, not because his heart is barren, but because he's learned how to live without fear of loss. A truly magnetic man isn't someone who's never lost something precious. He's someone who understands that every attachment has a price: time, energy, peace, self-respect, and he's no longer willing to trade his soul for temporary closeness. He doesn't fear loss because he knows it won't destroy him, but the wrong trade: giving his loyalty to someone who doesn't value it, bending his values for short-lived pleasure, or watering himself down to be more acceptable. That's what he guards himself against. To some, that might seem cold, distant, maybe even arrogant. But the truth is, he feels deeply. He just doesn't let those feelings steer the ship. He knows that emotional clarity often requires space, and that self-respect demands discipline on the outside. He may seem quiet, but inside, he's always asking the same question: what does this cost me, and is it worth it? And if the answer doesn't align with his truth, he walks away, not out of pride, but out of principle. That's what makes him rare, while others run from endings, avoid solitude, and fear starting over. He remains grounded. He doesn't panic when someone pulls away. He doesn't beg when someone leaves, because he knows if staying connected requires him to lose himself, then the connection was never right to begin with. The Stoic in him embraces impermanence like Marcus Aurelius. He understands that life is in constant motion. Things enter and exit seasons, change, people shift. He doesn't cling to what's passing. He doesn't dramatize what's been lost. He simply adapts with quiet strength. He releases what must go and nurtures what aligns with his path. And that confuses people, especially those who expected him to fight harder, to plead, to fold. But he won't, not because he's heartless, but because he's disciplined. Because he knows the most dangerous thing a man can lose is not a relationship, but himself. That's what makes his presence so powerful. He won't make you feel like his entire world. And yet, when he chooses you, it feels like the kind of choice that's rooted in deep conviction, not fleeting emotion, not because he needs you, but because he sees you as worthy of something. He rarely offers his peace, his time, his loyalty. And if you ever lose that place in his life, don't expect chaos. Don't expect theatrics. Just a quiet exit, one that leaves you wondering, not what went wrong, but how you lost something so calm, so steady, so irreplaceably real. Number 10, he doesn't seek perfection, he seeks growth. A magnetic man isn't caught in the endless race toward perfection. He knows life isn't a scoreboard of flawless achievements. It's a continuous journey of learning and evolving. He doesn't hide his flaws. He embraces them as essential parts of who he is, not as stains to be erased, but as chapters that shaped his depth to him. Growth isn't a far-off destination. It's a daily renewal, a quiet decision to show up better than yesterday, even if just by 1 degree. He doesn't wait for perfect timing, perfect clarity, or perfect confidence. He moves with what he has. He makes peace with the unknown. He accepts risk, faces uncertainty. And above all, he reflects and adapts. Mistakes don't paralyze him. They polish him. A Stoic at heart. He knows perfection is an illusion, and life doesn't reward the man who avoids pain. It rewards the one who transforms through it. So when challenges rise, he doesn't flinch when things get uncomfortable. He leans in. He sees adversity as a forge for strength, not a sign of failure. He doesn't wish the path was easier. He sharpens his mind, his patience, and his character. And this is what quietly separates him from others, while many pretend to have it all figured out. Curating image, chasing validation, hiding their struggles. He chooses honesty over illusion. He doesn't glamorize the grind he lives. He knows growth is messy, and that progress doesn't always look graceful, but he keeps moving anyway, because stagnation terrifies him more than imperfection ever could. What makes him magnetic isn't flawlessness, it's fearlessness. He's not afraid to begin again, not afraid to admit when he's wrong, not afraid to evolve beyond the version of himself others once knew. And that can be unsettling to those who need people to stay the same, because his growth doesn't just serve him, it silently challenges everyone around him to look at their own. He doesn't seek perfection. He seeks growth reflection. He doesn't need to prove perfection. He embodies effort. He doesn't talk about discipline. He lives it, and he doesn't chase applause. He chases progress. He doesn't seek perfection. He seeks growth. And that's what makes him unforgettable. Not because he's finished, but because he's still becoming, and watching a man choose growth over comfort, time and time again, is one of the most quietly powerful things you'll ever witness. So, what have we learned? Attraction isn't about chasing, it's conclusion about choosing. It's about being rooted so deeply in who you are that you no longer need to run after anything to feel valuable. A truly magnetic man doesn't seek to be liked, he lives to be aligned with his values, his peace, and his direction. Each point in this video has been a reflection of that truth. Stillness is strength, silence is presence, self-control is power, and walking your path regardless of who follows is the ultimate display of quiet confidence. That's the man who doesn't chase, and yet somehow always ends up being the one they remember. So if any part of this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on this question. Am I living as the man who needs to be chosen, or the man who has already chosen himself? If this video gave you something to think about, do me a favor, hit that like button to support the message, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and if you're ready to keep growing, keep evolving, and keep building that unshakable presence, watch the next video on screen. Now you're not just watching content, you're becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to chase because his life speaks for itself. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.